listening to Season 1 of the Get Started podcast, the podcast show set to reveal fintech's brightest founders. We've kicked off with 9 fintech leaders recording live at Europe's biggest fintech show, Money2020. Stay tuned and email us at contact@getstarted.media if you'd like to feature.
Day 1, guest 1 of the Get Started podcast. We've got Greg Cox, Group CEO and co-founder of Quint Group. If you could just, you could do a much better job than me telling us about Quint Group. So if you could just tell me a little bit about the business and the brands that sit within it, that would be great.
Sure. Well, I'm very pleased to be here on the Get Started podcast. So Quint Group was founded in the wake of the financial crisis, fundamentally to explore the convergence between financial services and tech and online. It was May 2009. I founded the business with my co-founder. Back then it wasn't called fintech. That didn't, I think, kind of get coined until 2013, 14 really, to any great extent. But we spent the last 10 years building fintechs, predominantly within the kind of consumer credit and financial services space. Today we've got 5 businesses. Our biggest business is called Money2020, which is co-owned by TransUnion, the global credit bureau now. Money2020 provides a technology and platform for banks and lenders to distribute credit offers to third-party websites. We have about 150 to 200 banks globally use the platform. Revenues is about £40 million, and it operates in the US, Australia, and the UK. We're here at Money2020 with Acquired.com, which is our payments business, and we're focused on recurring commerce and just rebranded today. So we're now electric.
Perfect time to be talking to us.
Yeah, we're now electric pink and dark green, so hopefully
Your
everybody
colours.
will notice that. Yeah, electric pink's my favourite colour, or it is now. It's today, that's for sure. So payments business, focused on recurring commerce, a data business called Infineon, and then some direct-to-consumer brands as well. Overall focus for the group is kind of solving key infrastructure and consumer challenges within financial services, kind of credit and payments. And on the consumer side, we're really kind of passionate about financial inclusion and improving access to credit.
And you've moved Acquired into Quint Group now.
Yeah, so Acquired wasn't originally part of the group because my co-founder, Paul, who I brought out of the group quite a long time ago now, probably 6 to 8 years ago, he wasn't involved in Acquired, so it was never formally part of the group. But we tidied that up and it's now very much part of the Quint family.
And it's interesting in terms of the focus on credit. You've obviously had a vision there. How's that been transitioning to different geographies in the lending space? Yeah,
so our Money2020 business we've internationalised pretty successfully this time round, but I tried to take a business in credit over to the US about 7 or 8 years ago and came back with my tail between my legs. Then we did it again with Money2020.
Not the only one.
Not the only one, no. But we managed to crack it a second time round. So the business is very transferable globally. We've kind of proven that out now. It's been helpful having TransUnion as a partner in the States to build a business. But yeah, it's going from strength to strength, and we'll probably internationalise some of the other businesses over time.
And how has that partnership been? Because you were independent for a long time.
Yeah, so we've kind of retained our independence because TransUnion own a minority stake in the business, which has been great. Yeah. We formed a global strategic partnership with them, so they've sold our products and services, helped us sell our products and services into their global client base, which has been great. I think partnering with a huge US public company, right, can be a challenge, but I think both TU and us have been successful in working out the right way for the partnership to operate. And I will say to them, they're the super tanker and I'm the speedboat. So use me like a speedboat and I'll use you like a super tanker and it'll all work out.
Sounds like a good premise.
Yeah.
So I guess is it nearly 15 years the Quint Group's been in existence?
It is, yeah. Somebody asked me that this morning.
I feel that long.
And I always think it's 10 years. And then it became 11 and I still said, a decade or so. But I think, it's pretty much 15 years to the date.
Because I think we first met when it was 10 years.
Yeah.
Because I think my business at the time was 10 years.
Yeah, I think you're probably
Stuck in time.
And if somebody asked me, I said, I've only known you for a couple of years, right? Time flies.
I know, aging.
So I feel like I need to close it and start a whole new company up so it feels like a jazzy start-up again.
So you're not based in London. You're not based in London. You have some offices. Acquired, I know, has some offices, but you have a big HQ outside of London. Where are you based? Where are your team?
Yes, we were kind of founded in the northwest. Yeah. So we're based out of Audley Park, which is just south of Manchester, near kind of Wimslow, on a big science and innovation campus up there. So we have about 150 staff based in or around that area. But we've got offices in San Diego, office in London, as you just alluded to, offices in Cape Town where we've got an engineering team, and I guess staff dotted probably in another remote staff in about another 2 or 3 countries. So I guess global now, but very much heart of the business is in the northwest, just south of Manchester.
I think probably just to ask another question on that, because there will be much earlier stage founders than you perhaps listening to this. And the decision is, do you go to an outside of London hub because it's cheaper, you have good universities? Was it a decision, was it a circumstantial decision, or more of a, no, we're going to be outside of London?
It was completely circumstantial. I'd invested in a business in the northwest of England, which had failed in the wake of the financial crisis. Okay. And I found out that business had paid for its lease in advance for 18 months. And I kind of come up with this idea for Quint and was looking for something new to do at that time. I was 27 years old, I think. And I said to the other shareholders, does anybody mind if I use this office for a couple of months to explore this idea? And I hired Dawn Wood, who now runs Moneyvo's UK business, and said, do you want to come work for me? And thought it would be 2 months, and 15 years later, we're still there. But
I didn't realise she'd been with you that long.
Yeah, she's been there from the start. She was 23, I think. But I think, on balance, the Northwest has been a brilliant place to set up a company. I mean, it's changed completely since we set up Quint Group. Manchester's a true second city now. I think it's a great place to live. I think it's a great place to work. I mean, I think London's a great place to live and work as well. But I think if you're looking for a cost-effective base with access to great talent, great kind of connectivity to London, it's like an hour and 50 minutes on the train. I think that kind of Manchester region's really interesting. So yeah, we'd certainly have no plans to sort of change our centre from there.
No, there's been a lot of effort put into developing that Manchester brand as well, I think, has helped.
Yeah, big time.
You've alluded to it a little bit, that you were in between ventures when you sort of decided to explore fintech.
Yeah.
Be interesting to hear. There's a saying like, once you're in with fintech, you're 15 years in. Was there a moment where you thought there's definitely a problem here I'm going to solve? Did you know you were going to be a fintech founder? What was your background a little bit before then?
Yeah, so I guess I suppose the first time is when did I decide to start working for myself. Firstly, I've never had a job. I've never worked for anybody. When I left school, I went and played kind of professional, semi-professional rugby for about a year. And that was my sort of thing I was trying to do, and I guess my dream. And I got injured and had to take a year out. And I was then working on building sites because I was big and strong, I suppose.
Bit of grafting.
A bit of grafting. And I didn't really like the idea of doing that for very long. And actually, the moment where I decided to start to work for myself was I read an article in the Sunday Times, actually a little book, which I've still got, which was about importing cars from Europe and how you could save money doing it. And that then made me investigate that. And I started an internet business, which was basically selling cars from Europe into the UK. And I was involved in all the kind of .com retail startups like Carbusters and Virgin Cars. And that got me into automotive, which was the first sector I was involved in. So that's really, and then kind of never looked back, was kind of focused on, I guess, working for myself, and went through some ups and downs. That business went bust in the wake of the .com boom. I was a young man, didn't really know how to run a business very well or kind of deal with the fallout. So that was a tough time, and got myself back on my feet. And then in the wake of the financial crisis, you're kind of going, 8-9 years later, 2008, the stuff that I'd been doing, I was then still had interest in automotive and made some investments in some business, and also done quite a lot of property stuff where I'd invested my money, and that all wasn't turning out particularly well. And I was really looking for something new to do. And when I looked at the sort of the business that I'd invested in, I think I mentioned at the start, in the northwest of England, that was failing in the wake of the financial crisis, not through its own fault because it was in lending and there were no lenders, I started just looking at that kind of landscape, and it interested me, and everything was being done over the telephone in financial services and credit. So if people wanted to get loans or credit cards or anything, there were huge call centres with hundreds of people in it. People were sending like documentation for loans in the post, even on motorbike couriers, fax machines going off in the corner. And I was like, this just intuitively felt to me there was a huge opportunity. To me, it was obvious that it was all going to go online. And I was like, well, if we can be at the centre of that intersection between technology and online and financial services, there was going to be something interesting there. And there was, for sure. It was fintech. And we've been lucky that, we've been there broadly from the start and, been fortunate to do okay at it.
Well, I think, that's, I guess, early stage entrepreneurial spirit, seeing a genuine problem. A lot of what fintech's about is trying to improve the world around us. But since that beginning moment, have there been any defining, I guess, either decisions, milestones where you go, actually, that catapulted us to this place, things that you would almost advise, I guess, other founders to think about, or just things that are specific to you?
I think people always ask me about the milestones, and I think all these things are like an incremental journey.
Yeah.
So I find it difficult to pick out like particular milestones sometimes. But I think that I remember when I worked out, actually, I had a business and we were going to make some money. We started the group with £25,000. We've never had any venture capital investment.
That's incredible, though. If you look, 15 years now, it kind of, you take it for granted that anybody starting a fintech is going for capital.
Yeah. And we built, I guess, 6 or 7, and sold, 1.5 now without any investment at all. And I guess because of that, making money and being able to sustain ourselves was really important.
Yeah.
And I remember thinking, I think I can actually get this to make money, and I can actually start hiring some people, and I'm not going to live hand to mouth. So that was like a real intersection, I guess, kind of moving into profitability. What other things? I remember I was lucky enough to win the Queen, or the business was lucky enough to win the Queen's Award for Innovation in about 2017. I met the Queen, and that really punctuates the kind of sort of halfway point of the last 10, 15 years. And I'm a big fan of the late Queen. She sets an incredible example, and it was fantastic to meet her. But that arrived at a time where we achieved quite a lot of stuff, and that was a really nice way to punctuate it. So I'll always remember that. And the rest of it, obviously we sold a big stake in one of our businesses to TransUnion, so that was exciting.
Yeah.
Buying out my co-founder was great, because it was a really positive thing for him and a positive thing for me. So like with all these things, it's a journey that's punctuated by lots of little wins for the most part.
Yeah, and all of them seem to just be underlining that independent approach and vision. They're all sort of supporting that journey from the start, it sounds like.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I always wanted, for me and the management team, to own as much of the company as possible.
Yeah.
And retain as much of it as possible, so we could benefit from it as much as possible and get a return on our hard work. And we've probably taken different routes. Retaining independence and holding on to it is what we've done. Whether that's right or wrong, I don't know. But
I'm going to come back to that in a second. And then there's a lot written about, a lot said, a lot discussed, and I suppose people celebrating failure a lot more these days. I think remains to be seen whether that's a positive or not in the long run. Are there any failures, for want of a better word, that you've had that you wouldn't want to repeat, or on a positive note that have helped along the way?
I've had plenty of failures. I don't think we've got long enough on this podcast to talk through them.
An extended uncut version.
I think all the failures we've had, while at times they've been difficult, I think there's always been a positive in them. So we've set up businesses and decided that they're not right for us, or they're not part of the future. And while they're failures, I think it enabled us to do other things. We've had some tough times. I can remember vividly New Year's Eve, not being able to pay the wages. So I was hoping to pay the wages on Christmas Eve or the day before Christmas, which is normal. And I'd said to the guys that I can't. And I thought we'd get enough money in over that Christmas period to be able to pay the wages, and we couldn't. I remember I had to go and talk to everybody on New Year's Eve and basically tell all these young guys from sort of Macclesfield and Manchester where we were, they weren't gonna get paid, and that was difficult. And we actually did it on we had some money, and I was like, be democratic about it. This is how much money we've got. I don't have any money personally either to do anything about it. So times like that, which I wouldn't want to repeat, but that's all part of the journey, right?
I was just going to say the same thing. That's all part of that team investing in a startup or early stage business as well. And some would argue much better than being tied in by share options and things that are never going to materialise. At least you're going through that genuine process.
Absolutely.
With the team. So I guess that brings me back to one of the reasons I was so pleased to have you as the first guest. You're a special kind of founder. You've been through it and you've done things your way. Why do you think that I don't want to be too harsh on fintech, but I would say that there's been a couple of years where there was maybe a sentiment that fintech was failing.
Yeah.
There were a lot more businesses trying to raise, not raising, doing down rounds, pulling out, letting people go, making bad decisions all over the place. Do you think that that's just a part of an innovative sector, a new sector that's growing and changing? Do you think businesses need to fail, or do you think that fintech specifically was making some bad decisions that seem to see more businesses fail?
I think any new sector is going to see failure, and anything you do in life is going to have, ups and downs, and I think that's fine because, failing is part of learning, right? Mm-hmm. I do think though the money and investment into fintech's been misdirected, and that has driven arguably more failures and more and ultimately wasted money to a greater extent than it needed to. And I think the money that's coming into fintech now is more thoughtful and hopefully will be better directed, and that will result in kind of more focus on the core principles of running businesses and making sure they're sustainable and they've got a future rather than backing anybody with an idea, right? So actually I think there's some founders that have been backed and never should have been backed, but there was so much money flowing into the sector and this kind of fear of missing out that, I think some businesses were doomed to fail from the start. So I think, the big driver of that is, I think, the way the money's been invested. And then also I think, has fintech fulfilled its potential? The reason I'm so excited about our businesses is while we've been here for 15 years, I really feel like the next 10 years is going to be the really exciting bit. I think, there are key infrastructure challenges. Some of our businesses are, trying to solve for some of those things, and interoperability issues between financial institutions and fintech. And I think fintech's having to grow up and FIs are having to learn, how to work with fintechs. And over time, that community should become one fundamentally. So I think, there's still huge potential. If you kind of zoom out, there's been some, hugely exciting fintechs that have got a lot of market share. But if you remove like the top 20 outliers, the Revoluts and stuff of this world, I still think there's a lot more potential to be had. So I think it's just taking longer. And I was actually with an editor of a big national newspaper the other day, and he said, well, this whole thing about fintech, like, when's it going to deliver? And I said, Rome wasn't built in a day. It's been around for 10 years. That's nothing in the business world. So it's still in its infancy. I think, the opportunity is as exciting as ever.
And I guess that natural, I suppose what you're saying is that rising of the barrier to entry is a positive thing in terms of the journey of fintech really fulfilling its potential, because there was being that FOMO period, people weren't operating necessarily in a savvy way, they weren't developing business skills. It was a lot of businesses weren't even going for to be regulated at the right time. So maybe that rising of the barrier is a good thing overall.
Yeah, I think so. Look, I think, if people are taking investors' money, the investors should make sure that there's a reasonable business case and there's a good likelihood of business being successful. And I think, people being more thoughtful about it when they raise money and more thoughtful about the business can only be a good thing. But you need people to get out there and try, and you don't want entrepreneurs to be scared of trying, right? At the end of the day.
I think just one question specific for you on that, because we are, there's going to be some founders on this podcast that are early stage and they're going through that, right, we've done our pre-seed, we've done our angel round, we're going for seed, then we're going to go for Series A before we've finished our seed.
Yeah.
I guess the world's changed and it's not necessarily a route that you need to take. Do you have any advice for take money at the right time? How do you get a good deal? How do you know when not to raise? Yeah, I think you need to. So raising money takes a lot of effort and a lot of work. Full-time job.
So does selling businesses. I think you need to give yourself space between. You need to be careful with your money and don't waste it. Just because giving you somebody a load of money, don't go and spend it on unnecessary things or huge offices or whatever else, because cash is king. Mm-hmm. Make sure you create enough space with the round you've done to spend long periods of time focusing on your business before you're having to raise again. And again, make sure that when you raise, you are giving yourself time again, because what's very difficult to do is raise and run a business. And whatever you think you're going to do, halve it or cut it in 3, because you'll never hit your numbers. We still don't always, we're we're relatively mature, some of our businesses, you never do what you think you're going to do. So I think, just be realistic and find good investors that are aligned with what you want and how you want to work.
I guess a good deal is important, isn't it, as well, not just the cash. Like you said, you wanted to retain that value.
Yeah, and that goes to that forecast thing. It's obviously important for entrepreneurs and founders to think their businesses are going to be worth 100 million or a billion quid or 10 billion quid or whatever it may be. I think you've also got to be realistic. So you need to look at every deal you do in the worst case scenario.
Yeah.
So what happens actually if we're a really good little business and we grow 50% year on year and we've got 5 million quid of revenue in 5 years' time? That's not a bad outcome, right? But it happens. So I think, always look as the worst case scenario and don't get too excited about the bright lights of investors and venture capital and whatever else. Be calm, negotiate a good deal, make sure you're happy with that deal in the worst case scenario you can think about, and then if that happens, you'll be happy with the deal.
Yeah, good advice. And I think it comes across when you talk about the business and you talk about the sector that you're highly motivated. And I know that you still have a huge stamp on the businesses that you run, even though they're growing, they're international, they're varied. There's still definitely a Greg Cox stamp on the Quint Group. What motivates you to be like that?
Good question. I think fundamentally I'm interested in doing meaningful stuff and making a difference. And I'm hell-bent on fulfilling my potential, whatever that is. So I just can't stop until I feel I've done that. And hopefully, I think that's a good thing. I'm also now very motivated about my people fulfilling their potential too, my responsibility to that. So where I think when I was younger, I was very focused on that about me. So what drove me in the morning, being completely honest, was look, some of the things our businesses were doing are great and really meaningful, but the fundamental engine with me was, right, how can I best use my time to make an impact on what's going on and fulfill my potential and, ultimately deliver the results, whatever they may be. And I think as I've got older, I really enjoy and am motivated by getting other people to fulfill their potential too and make a difference, because it's way more fun doing it with other people. And then some of the problems we're trying to solve are really exciting, and they can obviously affect a much broader group of people and try and enable business, which I'm passionate about. So I think fulfilling my potential and my team's potential, and then the potential of the businesses, I guess, is what motivates me. Potential of our ideas, ultimately.
I love that description, and I wonder if some of it leans back to sporting days as well, that idea of peak performance and fulfilling potential and innate in your character.
Yeah, I think so, right? I think sports was a great leveler because it's a great comparison, right? It's easy. Yeah. It's an easy analogy, right? And it's so black and white.
I'll work on my analogies.
It's easy, but it translates really well into the business world and just life more generally. And I think, if you're playing soccer, right, and you're a whatever age, if you're serious about it, you want to fulfill your potential. If you come off the field and you think, I could have played much better, what motivates you to go back the next week is going back and playing and fulfilling your potential. I think that translates directly to life, really.
Yeah, I agree. Final quick question, just on being a founder. You said fintech's got so much potential. Is there anything specific maybe in the next 5-10 years about our lives that you think fintech's going to make an impact on? We've seen wealth tech spring up, insurtech, embedded finance. We've seen new areas of fintech sort of start to take the stage.
I think within fintech within our lives, I think things are just going to get smoother and more automated, and it will. If you look at where we are today and where we are in 10 years' time, I think it'll have moved on a hell of a lot. Mm-hmm. But I don't necessarily think it will feel like it's moved on, because it will just be gradual and quick, and our expectations are changing, right? And I always say to our guys, like, if you look at consumers' expectation, like, now if somebody thinks about ordering a taxi, they expect to be able to go on a really slick app, press a button, and it all look beautiful and it happened in seconds, right? That expectation's changed materially to where it was 15 years ago, which is like stand in the rain, right?
And that's
and
quite quick, really.
For a taxi. But I think it will. I think everything will get easier, smoother, more direct. We will solve in the next 10 years some of the kind of inclusion issues that exist, where I think some people are excluded from mainstream financial services, and I don't think that's right. I think at a broader level in life, if you look kind of fundamentally, what will change in the next 10 years, AI has the potential to change the way we do things and do tasks every single day. The kind of way I would probably articulate it is, if you remember, we watched the old sci-fi films or whatever, and they'd have robots, and every robots would be going around doing everything for you. I think it will be like that, but there won't be a physical robot, because so much of what we do is digitally.
Yeah.
But that's the kind of way I try and frame that to people. So I think AI is way more interesting than any of the other things like cryptocurrency and blockchain, in as much as I think now with Gen AI, the ability for it to be applied and used by everybody is already I'm using ChatGPT and Gemini, and we're using AI in our businesses, and that's happened within like a year, right? It's been quick. So I think that has a huge amount to change the way people work. I think the other thing in 10 years' time, which will, affect us, is we will potentially be dealing with the consequences of not addressing climate change if we don't do it. And I think that's probably...
There's actually a lot on the financial services world in terms of expectation of changing their ways and their policies around climate control.
Yeah. I think it's all linked, right? I think we just have to get behind it. It's one of those things that we are behaving... Like fintech can take 10 years, it can take 20 years, it can take 30, it can take 50 years. There's nothing, if it doesn't happen, nothing bad happens. I think we really forget with climate change that the clock is ticking, and the longer we leave it, the more difficult it's going to be to solve. So I think, but again, things like AI have the ability to materially move the dial on, things like that, and medicine and other things.
Not just because I'm in PR, but I do think AI's got a big PR job to do itself, to manage, perception, image of how we use it. It's so widespread, but there's even people now don't talk about it. They don't want to admit that they use it, or they want to say they completely use it. It's got. I'm going to be watching it with interest. I think how the message about AI changes.
Yeah, I think so. I think we all think about it in the context that we're in the space and we understand it.
Yeah.
I would probably, if you zoom out on the average person in the street, they're just going to use AI as an extension of Google and all the tools they do, and I don't think they'll think about it in the same context. I think right now people, some people get scared about robots taking over the world or whatever else, to go back to that analogy. But I think your average person is just going to start using AI just in the same way as they started using the internet. Yeah. And I think it's just going to be a second wave of that. And I think that will just dissipate, because people will be like, oh, well, if I want to learn about this, I use this application. And the fact that that's AI powered, it's like I use Gemini, right? And I use Google search. And so I think for the vast majority of people, subject to nothing bad happening with it, I just think it'll be something they use and embrace.
Just around us.
Yeah, I think so, right. Just like the internet.
And any other businesses on the horizon for you?
No, we're hoping to exit one of our businesses this year, which will be exciting. Yeah. We are about to launch a next generation credit business within the group, which is really exciting. And our Infineon data business, we're going to be making the kind of next steps to try and turn that into a real-time credit bureau over the next year or two. So that's really exciting. But right now, really excited about acquired.com and the direction of travel there, and how we can add value to people or merchants taking, repeat and recurring payments from their customers, growing like crazy at the moment and in a really exciting space. And obviously the rebranding and everything else is just adding further momentum to that. And we're just going to double down on the existing businesses, try not to do anything else.
You've got enough on there.
I think so,
enough on, just about.
Busy enough.
So I guess we're here at Money2020. It's a showcase for fintech in Europe. Yeah. How important are these events? What do they mean?
I think that's a really interesting question. Like, how important are they? Look, if they don't happen, the world's not going to stop. I think, for me, I think they're a great place to come and get energized about the sector and see what everybody else is doing. And that, for me, is the exciting bit. Suddenly I realised quite how big it is. I love seeing what everybody's doing. I'm naturally curious. I'm also competitive, so it drives me. So I find it It's a tiring 3 days, but I find it really energizing in terms of it really makes me think. It gets me out of my day-to-day kind of the blinkers that are on. And I think for, whether you're a new business starting up, wanting to come here, like if you want to go into payments, let's say, you walk around, you'll suddenly realise how many payments businesses there are, right?
Yeah.
We've got a payments business, and I'm still like, wow.
It's like a physical manifestation of the
Correct.
landscape,
So I
isn't
think
it?
it's a great way to just dive headfirst into the fintech ecosystem and see what's going on in a really consolidated way. And meet some great people. And obviously, if you're an established business, meet customers, meet colleagues, do stuff like this. It's fun.
Great. Well, that's all my questions. Thank you. Thanks for joining us. Hope it's a successful show for you. Sure it will be, and congrats on the rebrand.
Awesome. Thanks very much for having me.
You're welcome.
You've been listening to Get Started Podcast, the podcast show set to reveal fintech's brightest founders, brought to you by Communications House for Entrepreneurs, Started. To take part, email contact@getstarted.media or WhatsApp us on +44 7822 01 8863.